Welcome to the 12-step Big Book Workshop. As you all know, my name is Lisa, and I am a student of the 12 Steps Method of Recovery. And my focus is CODA, Al-Anon, and OA. I'm really glad to see you all here tonight on this amazing journey, and I'm excited to tell you we're going to be doing Step 2 today. And Step 2 states, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Some people refer to this as the hope step, Step 2, because it's designed to help you realize you don't have to fight this battle by yourself. And our problem is unmanageability, willfulness, spiritual malady, bedevilments, and no connection to a higher power. So please join me in the set-aside prayer with a commitment to have an open mind and an open heart, and the gift of receiving it beyond our every prayer. God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my will, and you as my source of power for a new experience with myself, Step 2, and especially with unmanageability. And just a little friendly reminder, I hope everybody's using the set-aside prayer for its most wonderful results. Really, really unmatched. So Bill says, if you genuinely wish to quit, but find you cannot, this points to a mental issue. And if you struggle to control the amount you consume, this indicates a physical problem. And you are likely an addict. Many of us discover we experience both challenges. In fact, probably most. Addiction leads to a slow and torturous demise, impacting us mentally through obsessive thoughts, physically in ways that complete abstinence almost impossible. Overcoming this requires a transformative spiritual experience to break the cycle of self-destruction. When we examine our pasts with complete honesty, we will find that we experience both mental and physical struggles simultaneously. This begs two essential questions. The first one is, can you quit entirely? If you want to stop but find it impossible, you might be an addict. And number two, do you have control? If you consume substances or use process addictions, can you manage the amount? If not, this might indicate that you're an addict. So when we're exploring our spiritual experiences, this particular chapter explores the profound spiritual journey, starting with the phrase, we agnostics, which fosters an immediate sense of intimacy. And it begins by tackling the complexities associated with the term God. Even back in 1939, this topic was contentious with many negative associations tied to organized religions. In this present day, this sentiment has only grown stronger as many people have faced unfortunate experiences with their families or their inherited religions. It's completely understandable that those who have experienced trauma in their childhood might distance themselves from the concept of a higher power or God. Because if they couldn't rely on their loved ones, how could they place their trust in an abstract idea? In my own journey, I found that organized religion felt too restrictive and outdated for my spiritual goals. And as I grew spiritually and intuitively, my earlier beliefs began to diverge from my newfound insights. Although I was raised Catholic and appreciate its rituals and history, it no longer resonates with my broadened understanding of a higher power. And organized religion feels too confining and prejudiced for me to commit to any particular one, though I can admit I do feel a strong inclination towards Buddhism, which mainly focuses on consciousness rather than the traditional religious structures. But Buddhism isn't even technically a religion, it's a consciousness seeking, I guess. During certain times, especially around the holidays, I find myself drawn to religious traditions, and I like to experience that comforting warmth in a church with the organ playing in my heart, beating with it, and that collective joy shared when that congregation gets festive around the holidays. I'm a kind of a sucker for that, I guess. What I came to realize in my vast search for meaning is that my higher power, God, creator, whatever we call it, has not let me down. My poor choices have. And before that, as a child, my parents' poor choices affected me and let me down, not God. And free will allows us to choose to pursue or reject organized religion with the potential to accept or resist God's grace, thus creating an independent spiritual path with a broader view of God. A relationship built on personal choices and love is more meaningful to me. If humans had no free will, their actions would be predetermined and there could be no true love or relationship with God, only obedience to a divine command. Albert Einstein did not believe in a personal intervening God, but he expressed a cosmic religion based on awe for the harmony and laws of the universe, often referring to it as Spinoza's God. For Spinoza, God is not a being who rules the world, but the very fabric of the universe. To know God is to understand the fundamental laws and interconnectedness of nature, which leads to a joyous and free life. Dr. Carl Jung did not believe in God in the traditional dogmatic sense, but he deeply believed in the psychological and experiential reality of the divine. Famously asked about his faith, he stated, "I don't believe, I know." Meaning he accepted the existence of the divine through direct, actual human experiences. But don't forget, he's also the doctor who sent people to find a spiritual being to become sober. Bill says, to one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible. But to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he is an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. Atheism is a lack of belief in any type of external gods, while agnosticism is a claim about the validity of God's existence. An atheist believes there are no gods or simply doesn't believe in anything, while an agnostic believes it's impossible to know for certain if a God does or doesn't exist. Therefore, they remain uncommitted. These concepts are not mutually exclusive. One can be an agnostic atheist, meaning they can lack belief in God, but believe the question of their existence is unknowable. In there, it is an open-ended prospect. So we are all powerless. We have no choice, no decision. Especially given that addiction is a death sentence, irrevocable, irretrievable, irredeemable, and hopeless. We have looked at unmanageability in the same context in step 1 with that dash, that our lives had become unmanageable. In my will, on its own natural human willpower, doesn't have any power to manage my life or my reality. These are the true experiences that we had when we looked at it with an open mind and heart. Predetermine an alcoholic horrific death or choose to live on a spiritual path. The proverbial fork in the road. Sometimes we go left, and other times we go right. But ultimately, we have to choose the road less traveled. I chose, and so did you, to be on the path to freedom, to discover our truth about ourselves. Even though it may be difficult and we may suffer, it brings that much needed promise of the deflation of the ego. Bill says to be doomed to an addict's death or live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face. You are at the fork in the road. Choose darkness on the path you arrived on, or choose the light. Whether you identify as agnostic or atheist, if you find yourself in either category or feel resistance to the word God, please don't let that hinder your recovery. Those are Bill's words. It's not as challenging as it seems. About half of our original fellowship members were exactly that, and Bill's referring to their agnosticism or atheism. Incorporating the set-aside prayer into your daily routine and as needed reflects our commitment to a new set-aside mindset. This means we acknowledge the need to let go of our biases. If you struggle with this, you can at least begin by being open to releasing your tight grip on your prejudices. Initially, some of us tried to sidestep this issue, hoping against hope that we were not truly addicted. However, eventually we had to confront the reality that we must find a spiritual foundation for life, or else. So have you convinced yourself that living life solely on your own terms will lead to success? If you have already attempted this, you may have experienced either a lukewarm sense of okayness, I'm ready to move forward, or perhaps a feeling of, oh God, I'm just completely lost. Or perhaps your journey will mirror this. But remember, approximately half of us believed we were atheists or agnostics. Our experiences demonstrate that there's no need to be worried about this. So if you're struggling with the question, it's completely normal. Half of his members were in this category, and it's not unusual. We've come to a place here where a lot of us feel let down by our higher power or our religion or our families, and there's so much in there that our guard is up. We're going to be really sure about this. So let's summarize. We have discussed the challenges related to both the body and the mind of an addict, which is where the problem lies. We also have identified a more significant issue than the spiritual malady. This is perceived as an internal struggle that drives addictive behaviors, leading to unhappiness, emotional distress, and an ongoing sense of dissatisfaction or emptiness. While they may have provided temporary relief, those days are not going to return. And the problem with our will, some people will call it the spirit. I prefer to use it as our will. It doesn't matter as long as you understand what's running the show in yourself, which also allows you to make your choices. Your willpower, the power of no choice, is the key to the success of steps 2 and 3. So here's the dilemma of step 1, not in terms of addiction, as we've already recognized it as a body-mind issue, but concerning our unmanageability. Step 1 reveals the unmanageability present in humanity. When I first encountered the concept of unmanageability, it resonated deeply. My entire life was riddled with it, extending beyond just my struggles with addiction. It was everywhere I looked. And it's a universal human challenge. According to Bill, it's a challenge that affects all humans, not just those struggling with an addiction. 100% of people, that's everyone, is grappling with unmanageability in some way or another. And Bill highlights that while addicts may be the most extreme examples of this issue, the struggle with unmanageability is present in the entire human population. He notes, where we addicts are the extreme examples of self-will run riot, he emphasizes that we often take this issue to an extreme level in all aspects of our lives, regardless of whether we are an addict or not. And I'm sure you can all look around you and see that everybody looks like they're just running around crazy. So once again, this model is essential not only for step 1, but also for moving forward. And it plays a crucial role in step 2 as well. Grasping this concept will unlock the secrets of step 2 and provide significant depth and momentum for step 3. It's not a matter of the body only, but rather a matter of the mind also. When we observe our will issue, 2 aspects show up to define our humanity. While we possess a body, so do a lot of animals. What sets us apart from other beings is our capacity for reasoning and our ability to make entirely independent decisions. When considering unmanageability, we must reflect on our predisposition to feel a lack of choice concerning our willpower. So, who am I as a person? It's a pretty profound question to think about. You might want to think about it over the next few days or whatever. So, a human being is a complex blend of qualities that influence our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And you'll see here on the screen, these are the 5 essential qualities that define our humanity: consciousness, empathy, creativity, resilience, and the pursuit of meaning and purpose. I can't deny that I am a material being with limitations, versus a finite person refers to a human being characterized by measurable boundaries, particularly a limited lifespan and impermanent nature. The term finite emphasizes that a person has constraints and cannot exist forever, unlike an infinite or limitless entity. This idea is fundamental to the human experience, as every individual faces mortality. Their lives are not eternal. I have a body, and it has emotions within that body, and I have a body for biological survival, enabling functions like movement, sensing the environment, interacting with the world, and reproduction. And I have a mind that processes information that it receives from my senses and body. We think and experience emotions with our brain, and it is the root of human intelligence. And I have a will. We have a strong sense of freedom, agency, and self-determination, which leads to a natural belief in free will and a sense of self beyond the ego. It's a pretty simple concept, and it will help with steps 2 and 3. And here's the big question. Is God necessary? This question of God's necessity is deeply rooted in our own individual beliefs. I personally don't envision a supernatural being residing in the sky, possessing human traits, particularly those being masculine, and orchestrating lives like a puppet master. Nevertheless, I have no trouble accepting that there must be a power greater than myself, especially after the realization that my belief is crucial for my continued recovery. And although I don't resonate with the word God or that figure type, I have a very deep belief in what I call my creator. As Aristotle wisely stated, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. On page 55 of the Big Book, Bill mentions, we found the great reality deep down within us. And I love that line, because it is deep down within us. Almost daily, I encounter a profound sense of calm and peace beneath the mental noise and fleeting physical sensations. This tranquility provides me with the strength to face whatever life presents, and as Bill would say, the power to carry it out. I identify this strength as my birthright, a quality inherited at birth in all of us. This great reality, as referenced in the Big Book, transcends all concepts, names, and labels. It defies description and remains fundamentally a living mystery, even when many have defined this through their very own eyes. Ultimately, the question of a God being necessary continues to be a topic of ongoing discussion and belief, rather than a universally accepted truth, whether in a Step 12 meeting or with a group of any people. It's always going to be up for discussion. But the important part when you answer this question, which I assume will be in the affirmative, is to understand and realize that your belief in whatever you choose is the road that you have to go down. You need to stay very focused on your own beliefs and not feel like you have to listen to even mine or Herb's or anyone else's. This is your beliefs. They have to come from you because you have to use them in your life. And if you don't put them in place and you don't believe in them, they're never going to work. So find your own beliefs. Even within your own religion, you can have your own belief. You might believe the rules or the laws of each religious type, but your own belief is buried deep inside you, and it's not there for anyone else to decide except for you. Bill doesn't use the name God in step 2 because he wanted to eliminate any religious words, as he wanted it to be neutral. He wants it to appeal to all of us from any belief angle, or no belief at all even. Step 2 is about a power greater than ourselves. It doesn't tell us what kind of power. Bill specifically left that up to us to decide and embrace. But a power greater than myself can refer to any entity, force, or concept that is larger and more influential than one's own personal will or ego, so that they can depict a power that can provide strength, hope, and guidance in overcoming personal struggles like addiction, especially when this power becomes enlarged. And the power is intentionally kept vague in the Big Book to allow for personal interpretation so that we can encompass our religious figures, nature, the universe, love, community, or even the process of recovery itself. Bill's goal was adamantly to have each of us choose or expand our own personal beliefs. This power, with a very large capital P, is very special. Remember, Bill uses capital letters for emphasis. And there is a lot of talk in 12-step recovery regarding sanity, and the reason is people don't really understand the Big Book and the vocabulary that was used by Bill, especially the use of the word sanity, which is why we look up certain words for clarity in the homework. Bill uses the word sanity to describe an obsession of an unhealthy mind. And he says on page 37, whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. Now, that was his choice. He also says, how can such a lack of proportion of the ability to think straight be called anything else? And he's referring to the foolish idea that Jim thought he could take whiskey if only he mixed it with the milk. He's not saying this is insanity, such as a clinical diagnosis. He's stating that we have a vulnerability to an obsession when our thoughts hijack us. That was a huge wow moment for me when I found out we are all being hijacked. And it's a really important point that we are being hijacked because it's further proof that we have no choice and that we need that power. At the end of the PowerPoint, I have some more information on the hijacked brain that if time allows, I'll go over it. If not, I'll just add it to the video and we can watch it later, but we'll see how it goes. Because I think it's important enough to understand the hijacked brain. It explains so much to me. So step 2 is a call for a decision, that big decision. And it centers around the act of making that big decision. Although the big book may not explicitly outline this, step 3 clearly states, made the decision to turn. While step 2 lacks some clarity, we can kind of figure it out. So step 2 is a decision about power, and it signifies a choice concerning that power. Step 3 is a decision about the relationship with the power. So in contrast, step 3 emphasizes your relationship with the power, showcasing a crucial distinction between the two. Step 2 encourages you to reflect on this idea and examine your own beliefs. What is your understanding of a higher power? Have you contemplated your personal beliefs about God? Look past external influences and assess your own developed beliefs. And Bill writes, if a mere code of morals, alluding to a framework that guides our ethical behaviors, or a better philosophy of life, which suggests a more profound understanding of existence, he implies that if our knowledge and theories about life were sufficient to overcome addiction, we would have discovered recovery a long time ago. So in our quest for understanding, and oh my goodness, most of us own shelves and shelves and bookcases brimming with self-help books that we thought would quell our discontent. We encountered methods that promised freedom and enlightenment and pathways of knowledge and claimed to be able to awaken us and offer transcendent spiritual experiences. Some of them have some great information. It's a great addition to the 12 steps. But on page 55, Bill writes, but we have found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. My office is filled with incredibly informative self-help books. At age 45, I enrolled in college to seek answers through obtaining a psychology degree. And it was quite an achievement. My oldest daughter also graduated with me. We walked down the aisle together. But likely, due to the effort it required at my age, and not to mention I was suffering from agoraphobia, it was quite a feat. I've also had the privilege of working with some very influential figures like Claudia Black, Wayne Dyer, Dr. David Hawkins, Carol Howe. There's many people I have worked with. My search has not been simple. It really hasn't. I also explored various religious organizations before ultimately identifying as a spiritualist for a while. I was striving to connect with anything beyond myself. I went to great lengths to uncover the missing pieces of my suffering soul. I know some people say the hole in their soul, but I don't like to use that expression because our souls are complete. We just don't see them that way yet. But my soul was suffering. These resources provided me with numerous answers and profound insights. But the element that truly filled the void was my spiritual awakening. That transformation emerged after really deeply immersing myself in the 12-step program for many years, while enduring some pretty painful experiences along the way. This is why I'm here with you tonight, to share my knowledge and journey to enlighten hundreds or even just one of you. My quest is far from over. I will continue to seek more answers and guidance until my final breath, because there's always more information. There's always going to be a larger, higher power. No matter what I can imagine or perceive, there's always going to be more I can add to that. That's one of the most beautiful things about it. I just know there's more to discover about this mystery. Bill states, we could will these things with all our might. Here, Bill discusses the transition from unmanageability in both body and mind to the realm of our willpower. He continues with, but the needed power wasn't there. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. Lack of power, that is our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live. Bill isn't suggesting that we can manage our addictions effectively through sheer will. Rather, he's addressing how to cope with our unmanageability in a spiritual way. He emphasizes that it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Finally, he poses the question, but where and how will we define this power? He states, well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main objective is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself that will solve your problems. And as we know, this refers to our lack of power rather than our addiction. It is not about exerting power over people, places, or things, because the lack of power is the dilemma. This indicates that Bill has authored a book that is both spiritual and moral. The term spiritual refers to the realm of the spirit, the invisible, the immaterial world, while moral pertains to our values. It is not a distinction between moral and immoral. So let's talk about God. Bill truly captures the essence on page 58 when he states, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us had tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. This message is aimed at those who believe they have already had a satisfactory relationship with their chosen deity. You might feel content, yet you may not have ventured into realms you never knew existed. Remain willing and open-minded to new insights, which can lead to transformative experiences and ultimately your spiritual awakening. What do or did you resist? What concepts align with your beliefs? What can you embrace and what should you discard? Make a note of your thoughts, as this is a good place to start in the search for more power. Bill says, we looked askance at many individuals who claim to be godly. How could a supreme being have anything to do with it all? And who could comprehend a supreme being anyhow? Yet, in other moments, we found ourselves pondering, when enchanted by a starlit night, who or what made all of this? There was a feeling of awe and wonder, but it was fleeting and soon lost. But it is a great reminder when you look up into the sky and you look out into the universe, how incredible this creation is. And this process isn't about getting rid of or ditching what you already have or know, unless you feel like, it's something you need to do. Instead, we want to focus on the vast potential for expanding our relationship with our definition of our Creator. What I'm truly advocating for, with great emphasis, is the willingness to reassess and expand your current beliefs to incorporate the immensity of what this Creator is capable of. If you're uncertain about where to start, consider incorporating a dedicated prayer into your daily routine. Ask for guidance to invite the light of your higher power into your life, gradually turning up the brightness. When was the last time you contemplated your highest belief? Have you ever taken the time for an assessment or reassessment? Or how about an upgrade? We upgrade our cell phones on average once a year, every 2 years. but we never assess our spirituality? How ironic is that? We were bothered with the thought that faith and dependence upon power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak or cowardly. Lots of us have had a less than perfect relationship with our higher power. Some of us have even abandoned our beliefs in our religion, finding it not necessary or no longer applicable. As a society, religion and belief in a higher being statistically is lower than it has ever been. The human brain has evolved, and as it has, the spiritual part has been left behind for many, as they have chosen not to see it with endless possibilities and growth. Bill writes, faced with addiction's destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we had tried to be on other questions. Perhaps we were able to meander along in life with the support of a creator that fit with the needs of that time, until it didn't. Life got bigger, we became bigger, our problems got bigger, and so too must our God or higher power get bigger. It makes total sense that when we expand, so should our creator. And I remember when I first was doing this work, I was feeling tremendous guilt over trying to find a different higher power. I was actually afraid I would be punished for questioning a God that I was giving. And it took some time to get past that because it was old beliefs that weren't even mine. But it's not unusual to feel some feelings that might feel a little negative when we're doing this work. We have been so set in our ways, and it's a big ego hit to find out, hey, we believe in something that might not be quite big enough. We might not want to admit that. But don't let that deter you. Keep going forward. So this is one of the versions of that famous Hand of God painting by Michelangelo. It's in the Sistine Chapel in Rome. And he painted at the top of the dome, the whole top of the dome. He painted it while lying on his back. And to me, it signifies that we are all co-creators. We take what we choose and create through the power of our connection to the source, the creator, our higher power, God, whatever you choose to call it. So as a co-creator, I choose the medium, I pick the colors and the theme, but my creator finishes it with the end result of its choosing. I can only paint the background. My creator finishes it for me, which I can't do by myself. Jesus taught that all of his followers were capable of doing the same as he did, and even greater works. He said that all things are possible for those who believe. Judaism views humans as co-creators with God, responsible for developing and improving the world God created through their actions and creativity. A lot of religions teach that humans are co-creators with the creator, meaning we are given the freedom and capacity to partner with the creator in the ongoing creation and betterment of the world through our actions, endeavors, and care for creation. So I handle the groundwork. I purchase the seeds, I bring them indoors and I plant them into the soil, I prepare it, I give it some nutrients. And when the time is right and the calendar says it's time, I transfer them outside and I try to ensure they're watered and fed. My role ends there. I cannot create flowers, but I can certainly plant the seeds. And I could try to make those plants grow faster by pulling on them, but that would just kill them. Bill says, we found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. Bill's perspective emphasizes that any notion of God that I believe I can define or understand is going to fall short, as my mind is neither vast nor evolved enough. Therefore, my thoughts about my Creator are inadequate since the Creator is infinite and I am not. The language needed to express my Creator's nature is beyond my comprehension, which aligns with Bill's assertion. We commence to get results, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. It is entirely acceptable that we do not grasp this concept, and it is a delusion to believe we can hold an adequate understanding of God. What may be effective for you is perfectly valid, and that is the essence of what we aim to explore in step 2. What works for you? And much to our relief, we found that we did not need to adopt another's understanding of God. Our own conception, though imperfect, was enough to initiate our approach and establish a connection with our source. Once we acknowledged the potential existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe that encompasses all things, we began to gain a new sense of power and direction, as long as we followed a few simple steps. Bill discusses power and direction, specifically the direction of my thoughts and the guidance necessary to harness greater power for my will, enabling me to act in accordance with what I believe to be best, as long as we follow a few simple steps. And what does Bill mean when he says, provided we take other simple steps? Is he referring to his earlier statement about being willing to go to any lengths if you have decided that you truly want what we offer and are prepared to do whatever it takes to obtain it? This statement relates to step 3, where Bill is setting the stage for our commitment. It's not merely a call to action, rather, it signifies our readiness to engage in steps 4 through 9. He writes, we begin to be possessed by a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. We found that God does not make two-hearted with those who seek him. To us, the realm of spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. The realm of spirit is expansive, and it's filled with endless possibilities. Bill is granting us ample space here. This represents the essence, the key aspect of the 12-step process, particularly in step 2, never exclusive, never forbidding to those who honestly seek it. And it makes me think about Bill back in the early 1900s and doing this work, and imagine if the people doing this work back then could see the world that we live in. I think they would have no problem enlarging their higher powers, because the world compared to back then is so magnificently changed. It would be very, very helpful, I think. So when we talk about God, we refer to our own understanding of the divine. Bill emphasizes that we should approach this journey just as we are, bringing what we have to the table. We can always make improvements later, but it's essential to start with what we already have. At the beginning, this was all we needed to initiate our spiritual growth and to establish our first conscious connection with God as we perceive him. Once again, Bill reassures us that whatever our current beliefs may be, whether it includes doubt or something else, is perfectly valid. We found ourselves accepting many things that once seemed entirely unattainable. We utilize our personal conception of God, regardless of how limited that may seem. If we've inherited our religion, it's time to reflect on what we wish to retain and what we might choose to discard. So imagine Bill W. sitting across from you. He asks, hey, have you considered this simple question? Do you now believe, or are you even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than yourself? This is a lot to absorb, especially since we've just received this information. And it requires time to settle and be reconciled within our thoughts and hearts. Bill understood this, and he acknowledged that 50% of people are non-believers, a point he made earlier. We carry resistance, having fought against it for a lifetime, which explains the depth of our suffering. Bill is ready. He reassures us, it's okay if you don't believe, but are you at least open to the possibility? We recognize the ache in our souls and how it impacts our lives. This struggle with addictions and our fears has been inadequate, despite our efforts with self-help, therapies, and the 12-step approach. I still sometimes find myself feeling lost in all of it. So if you find yourself lacking belief, are you open to the possibility of believing? If you've had even a small initial experience, you might recognize that there's something missing in your life. There may be an inadequacy in your approach to your addiction and your ability to make changes. Imagine that I don't believe or see the connection between this and my addiction. However, I might allow a sliver of light to penetrate through a crack of doubt, perhaps considering that there exists a higher power greater than myself, a creator who made me, consequently has the ability to bring about peace and sobriety. Bill asserts, as soon as a man can say that he does believe, or is at least willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he is on his way. So we have to be willing to be willing to be willing. And that might sound crazy, but a lot of people start with, all right, I'm willing to at least be willing, which means they're ready to open themselves up a little bit to see what's going on inside and see if there needs to be some work done on what their beliefs are. So keep that willingness always by your side. It's been repeatedly demonstrated among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a remarkably effective spiritual structure can be constructed. This spiritual arch allows us to step into a new freedom, and this willingness serves as the cornerstone. The foundation was already established in Bill's mind during step 1, where we deeply excavate our sense of powerlessness and reflect on our experiences with it. Now we place our cornerstone, which will guide the entire arch's direction, with the keystone at the top holding everything together. Eventually, we will walk through this arch into a new freedom, exciting and great news for us all. I don't know if anyone has done any kind of stonework or brickwork or anything, if you've ever built an arch. It literally magically stays together by the force of each stone pushing against each other. And it doesn't move. It's incredible. I mean, obviously, if you hit it with a baseball bat or something, it might. But it's incredible how that force keeps that arch together. And of course, the willingness is the cornerstone of it all. But it's truly an amazing thing to see something like that go up and it just stays without nuts or bolts or anything. And it's wonderful news, as Bill states, for we had assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith which seemed difficult to believe. So in addition to our struggle to accept a lot of stuff on faith, we often resist relinquishing any sense of control. This stubbornness and prejudice can impede our progress, which is why we pray the set-aside prayer. We need to be liberated from this grip of control. And one of the simplest yet most profound outcomes of embracing the 12-step principles is the gift of freedom. Addicts often lead lives filled with contradictions. We may voice one thing while acting in another way. We hide parts of ourselves, telling lies, and behaving inconsistently with the image we present to the world. The 12 principles emphasize the importance of consistency. When we embody these principles in every aspect of our lives, our beliefs, words, and actions align. Consequently, we no longer need to juggle anything but reality, allowing us to free up significant emotional and intellectual resources for fully engaging with life and making the next right choice. If you can't remember the whole step, remember the word that goes with the step, and that will really get you pretty far. Confronted with the destructive nature of addiction, we become as open-minded about spiritual matters as we had endeavored to be on other various issues. In this regard, our addiction served as a powerful motivator, ultimately leading us to a state of reasonableness. As we confront the reality of our lives filled with turmoil and unmanageability, we are driven to a desperate need for a higher power. We recognize that we cannot navigate this journey alone. Our repeated attempts have led to failure. We are weary, teetering on the edge of complete collapse, and sinking deeper into our afflictions. Restless, irritable, and discontented, we turn to Bill, who will provide us with a wealth of reasons, facts, and delve into discussions about science, electricity, and molecules, all kinds of stuff. Rather than viewing ourselves as intelligent agents and pioneers of God's ever-evolving creation, we agnostics and atheists have opted to believe that our human intellect is the final authority, the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end of everything. How vain of us, wouldn't you agree? Consequently, Bill concludes, those of us who have journeyed down this questionable path implore you to set aside your biases, even towards organized religion. Bill supports organized religion simply because they have provided purpose and direction to millions. He notes that we might have observed that many spiritually minded individuals from all races, colors, and creeds exhibited a level of stability, happiness, and usefulness that we should have sought for ourselves. Ouch, that one cuts deeply. Bill leaves us with a poignant, if only. We never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing in the way each teller approaches and receives of the power which is greater than himself. He continues, on one proposition, however, these men and women agreed. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than himself. The phrase came to believe confirms the gradual process of discovery and recovery. Bill discusses their perspective on power, emphasizing that engaging in certain simple actions can lead to a revolutionary transformation in our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. It's very important to remember that this power is done to us, but not by us. In step one, it is noted that in the face of total failure of our human resources and unmanageability, we found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into us. This occurred soon after we wholeheartedly embraced a few simple requirements. And here's the few that he outlined. Straightforward requirements, rather than mere suggestions, stating, if you seek a spiritual awakening, these are the actions you must take. Initially perplexed and overwhelmed by the apparent futility of existence, they reveal the underlying reason for their struggles in life. Setting aside the issue of addiction, which we know isn't the core problem, they explain why living felt so unfulfilling. He emphasized the concept of unmanageability, noting they illustrate how a transformation occurred, as hundreds, now hundreds of thousands, indeed millions, can affirm that the consciousness of God's presence is the most significant aspect of their lives today. And this entirely supports his earlier assertion in Appendix 2, which was the presence of God embodies the essence of a spiritual experience, awareness signifies conscious contact. So in step 2, this step confirms that we are in continuous contact and invites us to become aware of that connection. In step 3, this step will encourage us to transform that conscious contact into a meaningful relationship. Steps 4 through 9 will focus on eliminating the barriers to developing that relationship. And step 10 will continue to address and remove the obstacles. Step 11 involves sitting in meditation to enhance our conscious contact, illustrating how the entire process functions. In the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. We find ourselves constrained or fettered by our biases and prejudices stemming from a lack of knowledge and experience, which we cling to excessively. This attachment hinders our ability to perceive the truth. Bill poses a thought-provoking question. Are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as the ancients were about the realm of the material? Bill refers to misconceptions such as believing the world is flat or that airplanes can fly, ideas that have been debunked and are no longer true as we now understand them. When we observed others overcoming their challenges through a simple faith in the spirit of the universe, we could no longer doubt the power of God. Our own ideas failed, but the concept of God succeeded. We who identified as agnostics and atheists clung to the belief that self-reliance could resolve our issues. However, when we witnessed how God's sufficiency worked for others, we felt much like those who insisted that the Wright brothers would never achieve flight. It is not a coincidence that we possess the ability to reason, to evaluate the evidence from our senses, and to draw conclusions. This function of the mind is one of humanity's remarkable attributes. We believe it is more rational and logical to have faith than to lack it. We recognize that our previous mindset was vague and uncertain when we surrendered to doubt and declared, we don't know. Now we're going to look at the most crucial point in the big book. And really hear this. When we became addicts, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, we could not postpone or evade step 1. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or God is nothing. This is a mystery that we are looking at, this infinite force that has no beginning and no end. Bill says either he is or he isn't, and then says, what is your choice? We are not making a decision about God being real or not. We are confronted with the question of faith. We aren't able to prove if God is real or not. When I read this, I didn't like it so much. It felt so black and white, and I hadn't made an awareness of my own needs to be more gray in areas of my life through various disciplines, but especially in the 12-step fellowships. It was like, why are we becoming black and white again? So it took me some time to reconcile this very large idea of nothing or everything. And with lots of time and thought and consideration, it came to eventually make total sense. For me to believe in a higher power, for me specifically a creator, I had to frankly realize that to believe that it wasn't everything was a huge injustice to myself. I was shortchanging myself, my life, my spirituality, and more. And once I made the switch over to 100% everything, my behaviors, my whole life shifted. My life improved, and my fears all but disappeared. It never occurred to me to believe that my higher power was everything. I guess I thought it was bits and pieces, and When I wanted to be in control, I didn't need it and it wasn't there. And when I needed it, it would be there. And that has changed dramatically for me. So we arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. So I read this and I have to ask myself, what words would I use to describe my faith? What did faith feel like for me? Was it enough? Or did my faith always seem to fall short of my needs? Where did I come from before my actual birth? What is the force in the universe that was able to create Milky Ways and galaxies? What did Bill say about it? On page 47, he said, willingness. This is the cornerstone. Bill said willingness because without willingness, we won't be able to see the cornerstone. We will be stuck in our beliefs that our ego is larger than it can be and that it's bigger than God. We have to make that switch. So what about faith? Is faith a function of the body? Is it an emotion? Is it when I feel good, God is present? So that makes faith a feeling? Is faith a function of the mind? If I know and think and describe God, will I have some certainty about it? Is faith a fact? Is faith merely a function of the will? Can I shape it and bend it to my own desires? Is faith something that can be manipulated? As we've explored, faith is not a product of the mind by definition. It is the acceptance of what lacks evidence. There is no certainty inherent in faith, and it does not revolve around knowledge. Faith stands in stark contrast to the science of the mind. It is experienced as a sensation in the body. When we feel God's presence, we affirm it. If we don't, then God seems absent. This perspective may seem logical to someone like me who prioritizes rationality. If faith isn't about the feelings or emotions that arise within us, then what exactly is faith? Bill provided a clue on page 47 when he asked if we were ready to believe. It wasn't very clear then. However, on page 53, he stated quite plainly, God is or God isn't. What is your choice? The revelation suggests that faith is a choice. It's simply my decision. If God exists, my mind thinks, well, that sounds reasonable. But if he doesn't, I may find myself in trouble based on my initial experiences. Consequently, my mind embraces this choice, forming my beliefs. This acceptance of faith then translates into action, where my behaviors and actions rooted in my beliefs reflect my trust. And sometimes those beliefs and actions come before the trust shows up. Faith, however, feels empty, invisible, and lacking substance, maybe even thin and dark. There's no tangible reality to faith. Ultimately, it's a decision I make asserting that God exists, and I build my life upon that. So it resembles a gamble, a choice made with all my hope that it's true. I find myself shackled by the chains of addiction and an unmanageable self, yearning for freedom now. But I find I'm still confined, trapped within my self-imposed cage, held back from experiencing true freedom. However, steps 4 through 7 will hold the key to my liberation. At this moment, I must determine whether I believe in the necessity of God. The choice is yours to reflect upon and make. This represents step 2, a journey of belief, focusing on defining my understanding of God or my higher power. You should consider your own concept of divinity as well as the qualities you desire and require. So that's the end of the PowerPoint. I do have additional information if people want to see it on the hijacking of the brain, or if people would like to talk about the problem, which is unmanageability, willfulness, spiritual malady, the bedevilments, or no connection to a higher power. So if anyone did actually do the homework and would like to talk about that or ask questions or share whatever they did, that would be wonderful. Or if people are willing to be vulnerable and tell us what they honestly believe about God, not what you know or feel or want, but what you believe, not what you've been told. I'd really like to get some shares. It really helps other people that are searching for these answers when they hear others' answers. Mark, you want to hear the hijacking of the brain? I can go over that. And then if people want to go with this other stuff, we can come back. So the hijacked brain and what that means. This is a part that when I came upon it, I was blown away by the information. And it's easy to get discouraged by the slow progress and uncomfortable trade-offs of recovery, because sometimes it can be painfully slow. But take heart in the fact that the commitments and practices of your recovery journey are literally rebuilding the way that your brain works. In an excerpt from a book, A Gentle Path Through the 12 Principles by Dr. Patrick Carnes, he outlines current brain science behind addiction and healing and invites us to embrace recovery as a lifelong creative, emotional, physical, and spiritual process of healing and growth. In the 21st century, we know something that Bill W., Dr. Bob, and the other founders of AA intuited but couldn't prove scientifically. We know how and why recovery works. What the founders of AA discovered through trial, error, luck, and grace has now been validated by science. Recent developments in neuroscience, radiology, genetics, and psychobiology give us a clear picture of how addiction hijacks the human brain. They also give us equally clear evidence that working a 12-step program literally rewires our brains for recovery. So addiction changes the brain. It deadens certain cognitive areas and laying down neural networks that chemically encourage us to compulsively repeat harmful behaviors. All addictions, including those that do not involve alcohol or other drugs, create similar wounds in the same centers of the brain. Trauma, whether physical, sexual, or emotional, changes the brain's chemistry, predisposing it to addictions and compulsions. The new thoughts and behaviors produced by working the 12 steps appear to heal the brain in observable, predictable ways, building and deepening new neural pathways. And as these neural pathways deepen, we create new healthy patterns of thinking and acting. So no matter how addicted we are or how unmanageable our life has become, our brains retain the potential for healing and recovery in their very cells. Safety is a prerequisite for healing the brain. Only when the brain feels safe, when it isn't functioning in crisis mode, can it optimally reconstruct itself. Because remember, crisis mode is making the neural pathways that we're trying to heal. So it's very important that we do this neural redirection in a very safe way so that the brain will be happy to do it. So these breakthroughs paint a vivid picture of what happens in recovery. Combined, they verify the original insights of the AA founders in 1935 They also explain why people who leave 12-step programs and don't find similar guidelines for changing their thinking and behaviors usually fall back into their addictions. Let's look at some of the ways in which the brain's chemistry and biology affect our recovery. So this is the hijacked brain. The addiction hijacks our brain. Over time, it damages the brain so that it consistently makes harmful choices, even when we don't want it to. Think back to the days before your recovery began. Hold on. You would plan and intend to do one thing, sometimes with great resolve, yet despite your best efforts and wonderful intentions, you would nevertheless do something different and harmful. Brain scans have revealed the neurochemistry behind this. All addictions partially damage or disrupt the frontal lobes, the parts of the brain responsible for judgment, discernment, and common sense. This disruption is biological. It has nothing to do with a lack of will or poor moral judgment. These biological changes require significant biological healing. This healing takes time and closely parallels the healing of a stroke victim's brain. As neuroscientist Brian Kolb explains, people with addictions or strokes can't just sit back and wait for the brain to heal itself. Deliberate, ongoing effort is essential. As Dr. Kolb puts it, grab the frontal lobes and don't let go. The 12 principles are vitally important in recovery because they help us focus ongoing energy and attention on healing. They also give us a recipe for sticking with recovery over the long term. In addition, they provide a framework for living a sane and serene life. This framework is built on universal psychological and spiritual principles that work for everyone, not just people in recovery. This applies to trauma, strokes, any kind of brain disorder. So working the 12 steps can take us to a place of safety, sanity, and serenity, which the brain is requiring. But the 12 steps are the beginning of a journey, not a destination. Over time, as our recovery deepens, we need to internalize and practice the principles that are suggested by the steps even more in our affairs. Principles require a higher level of thinking and learning than any rule because a principle requires both reflection and mindful implementation. As a result, principles use far more of the bandwidth of our brains and more oxygen and energy. It takes almost no thought or energy to follow a sign's instructions to keep off the grass. But it takes discernment, humility, focus, and self-awareness to practice courage. The 12 principles also help us integrate the many different areas of the brain. This is an observable biological process, not a metaphor. Full integration requires thousands of hours of focused effort, typically 5 years or more of working the steps and practicing the principles. And this is really only laying the foundation for what is a lifelong process and journey. And don't let the 5-year date blow your minds up. Most of us have been in the program more than 5 years, but don't let that be a sticking point. To the brain, recovery is very similar to learning a new language. At first, we focus on learning the basics, vocabulary, pronunciation, and the placement of nouns and verbs in learning a language, to becoming aware of all the ways our thinking gets hijacked, how our addiction harms other people, and so on. Over time, however, as our fluency builds, we begin to naturally do the next right thing. Picking the correct word or putting our sentences in the proper order corresponds to being honest with ourselves and others, recognizing and acknowledging our feelings, empathizing with and accepting other people, and so on. Eventually, this new language, or for those of us in recovery, the thoughts and behaviors engendered by the 12 principles and 12 steps, become fully integrated into our neural wiring. This wiring is not just in one part of our brain. Until recently, scientists thought that the part of the brain known as the hippocampus was the seat of all our emotions. Brain scans have revealed, however, that we all have very long chains of brain cells that appear to weave back and forth around the hemispheres of our brain, starting on one side of our head and ending on the other. These carry information and the capacity to experience emotion all over the brain. It turns out that our emotions aren't localized in any one part of the brain. They're built into our brain's organizational structure. Our emotions also may partly reside in other parts of our body. It now appears that every human heart has cells that are involved with our experience of certain emotions. We often say that we know something in our hearts. It turns out this may be literally true. That is the conclusion. So what do you guys think about that whole hijacking of the brain?
Hello, everybody. I first wanted to say that I'm feeling a lot better, but I
Yay.
was pretty sick for a while, and but I have recovered, so that's great. Not totally. I still have some symptoms, but I know I'm on the mend. So I wanted to address the homework a little bit and tell you what I believe is my definition of quote unquote God,
Great.
and then and tell you kind of like how I developed it, and then a special thing that happened today, and I'm really excited about. So, first of all, what I believe God is for me is a sense of unconditional love of me. It's just the sense that there's something out there that totally has unconditional love of me and actually of others. It may be their own God. I mean, but it's really about me here. Unconditional love of me and me trusting that that unconditional love leads to freedom from my unmanageability. So that's my belief system. Now, how did I get there? So my first step was because I mean, God was just like you say, just this weird came with so much thinking that I did a want ad, which when you look at your homework, it says, I don't want to know what you want God to be. And that was my first step. Somebody suggested, and I said, oh, that might be fun. So I created a want ad for my higher power. Like, do you like pina coladas? I want my higher power to be who knows what. So I made this list of what I thought was the absolute coolest higher power. And that was my higher power for a while. And then I changed it to a higher power that kind of like was not necessarily a human form. So it became more like a cosmic kind of like soft dust floating around. That made it easier for me to think about it as assimilating in all parts of my body. And the dust was not gritty. It was more like soft and gentle and incorporated humor and love and respect and just a kind of open-minded kind of God. So anyway, that's kind of where I am now. I drew a picture of it too, of what my God looked like because it wasn't human form anymore. So it kind of was like just dust floating around, but it was a really pretty picture. I still have it somewhere. So today,
Jill,
yeah, go ahead.
tell us a little bit how you came to that. What was the process?
Well,
Like, how did you get there?
okay, so of course I go to a lot of meetings where they talk about higher power and doing the steps, and I'm listening to people's different stories about what they're doing, and the different names they called our higher power and stuff. And I just keep listening. And I just thought it was something I would eventually embrace, but eventually that advertisement piqued my interest, creating a want ad. I just thought that would be funny. So that
Yeah.
was my first little step in it, and that was maybe a year or two into recovery before I even embarked on that. And then I didn't think it was something somebody said, or maybe just something I felt, that it really wasn't a human being for me. It wasn't that God or Jesus Christ face or anything. It just needed to be more like cosmic-y and dusty. And so for it to be all over every part of my pores and whatever, for me it had to do that. So it was just I think mostly it was, I also read a lot. I spend hours, like you said, thousands of hours. I do put in those hours. And I don't do it sitting down like it's, oh, I'm going to school. I I
Right.
I find it fun. I find it interesting to read new things. But I when I read it, I do I it would be boring if I just read it and I go, oh, this is another piece of fascinating scientific information or something. I I constantly make a connection to me. So if
Good.
I'm reading something, I go, how does that play out in my life? Or give me an example of how I do that. Or when does that show up in my life? I do a lot of asking that question as I'm reading, and that helps me grow quickly and helps me assimilate the thinking that helps me grow.
Nice.
Yeah.
Are you done seeking?
No, I got one more thing, but I'll wait.
No, are you done seeking?
Oh, seeking. No, no.
Okay.
I thought you said speaking. No, that's good. I know it will, my higher power will continue to evolve as I
Right.
evolve. But this is where I'm at now. And you said, what do I believe now? So that's,
Right.
I'm just sharing that. And then I
Excellent.
wanted to show you an example of how I did make conscious contact with what I believe is my higher power now, and it was the most coolest thing. So I have, as I'm recovering, I do have relationship issues. It's not that I don't have friends and people I see. I go to different events all the time, but I tend to catch myself now that I'm more aware. I judge people. I shouldn't judge people, but I do. And these are nice people and they're kind, but I'm like, oh, they might be thinking this or they might be doing this, or why are they? I get into game playing around friends, and I decided that I was going to get together with a friend today, and uh, I was going to kind of like no, how I don't even know how I said it to myself, but I was going to kind of let go and let God. Wanted to see if I could be less judgmental and more just enjoying the person and the event and the situation. And I just said, I contacted her and said, you want to go walking this morning? And I've done it before. She said, yes, no. But anyway, long story short, she said no, but I never got my butt out the door. And finally I did. And she said, I'll go now. And I go, great, let's go now. We'll go a little later. And what happened, I could have never asked for this to happen. But what happened was I felt like I was kind of going in slow motion. I know I wasn't. I know I wasn't. But my entire thinking and body slowed down. I think I walked slower. She actually needed to walk a little slower than my normal pace, but that wasn't a
Mhm.
problem for me because I wanted to be connected to her. So there was no judgment there. I enjoyed the slower pace and listening to her, but my mind was slower. And so I heard her slower. And so I responded less reactive and more with consciousness. And I did afterwards, like I said to myself, I got that whole thing was in slow motion. And my conversations were so beautiful with her. She invited me up to her apartment. We sat and chatted. And it was just a very intimate experience that I really enjoyed. And a couple of things, what happens with my friends, and it seems like everybody, they always have a point of view or they have a perspective. They want to tell me what they think. And because of my dysfunction, and for me, what I do is go, yeah, you're right. I go, oh, that makes sense. I'll change the way I think. I don't say that, but I start to just, I become a chameleon or I morph into other people's thinking and feelings so that I am good enough, so that I am accepted. And I don't confront them and say, well, I don't think like that. So there were a couple of times in our conversations where she said, you want to consider A, B, and C. And I'm like, I've already considered that. And I already picked C and I know why, but I would never say that because that would tell her that her suggestion was wrong. And I have to take care of everybody and make sure that they think they're brilliant at all times. And I'll just sit in the background. So instead I said, well, I like your A, but B works for me because of boom, boom, boom. But it was slow motion. And I was able to articulate it clearly. She goes, oh yeah, that makes sense. I've never done that before. I don't think I've ever been so forthright to say, I think different than you. That I always felt that if I thought different than somebody, I would lose their friendship.
Hmm.
And that's not true.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually was myself speaking my truth, and and it only happened because I think what happened was I let go, let God, and everything was slower. I go in hyper mode. I just, I'm a hyper person, I think. I'm hyper vigilant. I overthink, I overdo, I overplan, and I could just be. And it was just wonderful. And I think it's because I had faith that my higher power, I had faith.
Yep.
And that's where I went with it. And it was a really nice experience. And it kind of tied into the homework and everything. So I thought I'd share.
That's tremendous, Jill. It sounds like you have a contemplative walk, so to speak. Some people walk to meditate, and you might
Mm-hmm.
have been almost in a meditative state on your walk. Your connection was so strong. That's just wonderful.
Yeah, I always thought I had to do that by myself because I
Mm,
have walked and meditated by myself many, many, many times. But
yeah,
this time I really feel that's where I want to go in my recovery is working on my codependency and my development of relationships of all kinds. And it's working. I'm taking the risk. I'm trusting.
excellent.
Okay,
Thank
I'll
you,
pass
Jill.
there. Sure. Bye.
Thank you, Jill.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark, go ahead.
Yes, hi. Can we go off the recording for a little bit?
Yeah.
So I missed, for some reason, I don't know. I did miss some of the reading, but I took my time going over the definitions. I think really because I just wanted to kind of like think about some of them, which was kind of interesting. Um, just like belief versus love versus what is an atheist? Does an atheist actually have any belief? Um, just even like to be honest, for example, and this will go into the question you asked. It's kind of really kind of weird sometimes because like I can be an agnostic about harder forms of recovery, if that makes sense. Like about the idea that like God will help me get a better gig and help me in this area. I can be an agnostic even though I'm not. So it's like a weird kind of thing. I'm really not, but about like this era in the life that I think I should be able to control, or you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
I'm not really sure that you can do it, you haven't done it, or you're punishing me, this kind of, so it's really kind of interesting to in that context. And then like faith, um, like I looked up faith, for example, it's allegiance to duty or a person loyalty. And I realized that if I'm going to be straight, like a lot of what keeps like this current addiction like alive is just like a lot of fear. like the 100 forms of fear are right there. Just fear to do this, fear of doing that, fear of, like sometimes I've had like clear, like God says, okay, let's go this way. Just thinking about it, kind of like freezing, and then I reflect on the thing like with the mind that you were talking about, like
Mhm.
we're just kind of the fear hijacks my mind, and I'll be
Yep.
like, I don't know if I can do that action, so I don't do the action. You get me?
Yeah.
And then trust, like the sure reliance on the character. um Hope, and I already addressed the agnostic thing, and then process. The whole thing is like a process, because it's like a process addiction. What do I believe about God? I'm basically going to say what I already just said, is that I have a very established kind of um God consciousness, which I actually got it in reverse from working the steps. A lot. I kind of like reestablished, and that's just how it like happened for me. It wasn't. And let's see. So I'm not really clear. I'm clear that what I'm clear about certain parts of my recovery. I'm just not clear how to get there, in my understanding in the context of. So it's kind of like, it is kind of nebulous, like in as far as this addiction, because like I have clarity on the one hand, I should be going in that direction, but how to get there in the ABC, I have no idea. And sometimes I think like, if I'm honest, sometimes I think like he's kind of taking a break in my case, or he's on vacation. And those are the kinds of thoughts that I actually think sometimes when I don't get what I want, and I often don't get what I want. But at the same time, even though I'm saying that, I know that a lot of still keeps a lot of the active addiction in play is just like fear, like a lot of fear of
Mhm.
doing new things, going new places, and then I think when I think a little bit of sort of like kind of winding down, like this, I've been active in this addiction. Like I at first I thought it was like, but as I've at this point, I'm like 3 years back in this particular program. I realized, no, I've been acting out, outside of recovery, like over, most of my life, even longer than the other addiction. So that's another thing. When I look at like my progress, a lot of times I'm very kind of hard on myself, but it's like, if I was doing this like longer than any of the other addictions, like maybe I want to be a little bit more patient. And yeah, I think I could leave it there. Yeah.
When you talk about your addiction, you talk about it like you have more than one, but you also seem to talk about treating the addictions differently. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, because some of them have been removed completely. You know what I'm saying? But what I've found with the process addictions, in particular, they have not been removed completely. Now, and the one I'm working on specifically, there to get, I've had progress since I've been in program, but it's not, it's like it's just it it's different. It's complete opposite of all the other programs. Like it's like, so whereas, for example, with the textbook we're using, with A&A, like, and I'll speak about myself, I've had that completely removed. You know what I mean? That was completely removed by following exactly what they told me to do. But for example, with my under earning, I've seen progress, but it hasn't been completely removed. It has not. You know what I'm saying? Like like I still, even before I lost my job, I was still not earning what I should have been earning. You know what I mean? Like, so I had made progress prior to not having any kind of recovery whatsoever. But to say I was completely free of addiction, it's not. Like, the context is different. It's like sort of like, in some ways, a slow roll, but I also was pretty honest with the way I expressed it. A lot of the blocks to moving even further, really fear based on my side of the street. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's the two roads that you can take. You can take the fear road, you can take the faith road. That's the only solution to fear, is to be more in your faith. So my next question would be to you, have you considered the God is everything statement?
Yeah, I consider it often. Yes, I do. Yeah.
How do you feel about it? Are you there? Are you still thinking, I'm trying to get there? Or how does that work out for you?
Well, then it works out for me. Then the answer is no. A lot of times, or the answer
Okay.
is some of the things aren't right if I interpret it based on my cosmology. You know what I mean?
Okay.
If God is everything, then that would mean everything that happens is
Hmm.
happening on purpose, or that my frame of everything. You know what I mean? Like my frame on, for example, not getting that gig that I thought I should get, maybe that's not what God wants me to get, if that makes sense. Like, from the perspective, maybe my frame is not good. You know what I mean? Like, if my
Right.
frame was always negative, then I'll see it as negative. Like, if God is
Right.
everything, then it's always for my good, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? If I tweak my mind to that extent, then it's
Right.
like, even if you don't get X, even though you ask for X, but you don't get X, you didn't get X because you weren't supposed to get X.
Right. So God would be in the X.
Right.
So in technicality, it is everything.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just
I mean,
I'm just I'm just mirroring what you're saying. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying is that's what I'm hearing you say.
well, yeah, my that would be my understanding. If God is everything, then he always is. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. One of the things that people stumble upon with that statement is, how can God be everything? But what about when the bad things happen or stuff doesn't go the way I want? And the way I've interpreted is, well, God's in there too, or we wouldn't survive it. We wouldn't overcome it, or we wouldn't get past it. So even though it doesn't work out the way we want, or have a positive spin on it, the I believe that God is still in there because that's the support that's offered us. God doesn't make decisions or run our lives, but there's always support. So even in the bad stuff that we call bad, there's an element of God in that too. I'm not saying it's causality, but I'm saying for me, God is everything, meaning even when that bad stuff happens, there's an element of God in there.
Okay. Just some thoughts that I wrote down with this question. What do you honestly believe right now? And I'll read this, and if I can read my writing. What's God? Okay, this power greater than myself that I've always had. It's always been there. Because even since the age of awareness, like preteen, I have wanted to improve myself, but
Mhm.
always in a selfish, ego-driven, vain kind of way, like competitiveness or, comparing with other women. In recovery, this power that I say is grace has given me a sense of neutrality and helped me be a better person. In addiction, not maturing, but now into a less self-centered person. In recovery, the God center of my being directing me to do the right thing. Guidance from other people, but in the end, it's my behavior that comes out. And then I quoted in the big book I read this, this power signifies the ability to choose the path our minds recognize as correct. And I don't get impatient with my evolution because it took millions of years for humans to evolve. And there was a lot of adaptation. So there's a lot of error and adapting in my journey of recovery, getting waylaid along the way by this or that addiction, but always correcting course like the GPS, rerouting to a better person. And I like the name Creator because we're made in God's image, they say. And to me, that means that we create too. And I'm always at peace when creating or making things grow from seeds. A miracle, this power gave to me what I could not do for myself. So I say God.
Excellent. Excellent. I love what you said about the improvement was ego driven. I never thought of it from that aspect before. And yeah, totally. I totally resonate with that, that the ego, for a very long time, the improvement was ego driven. I love that. Thank
Yep.
you.
I was just going to throw in a quick comment that I think food addiction is a much harder area to deal with than any other addiction because you have to eat food. You know,
That's right.
I mean, I gave up alcohol because I realized what a problem it was, but it took me a long time to finally get into the spiritual aspect of it. Addiction is much tougher than mine was. So, just a
Yeah.
comment.
Well, I want to say something too, just very quickly. I was thinking when people were talking about God and their thoughts about what God is, I have always loved feeling a warm breeze on myself. And sometimes when that happens, when I'm walking or if I'm outside and I feel that warm breeze, to me, that's a higher power. That's God.
I agree. I agree. I think there's a lot of God in nature and, the outdoors and the mountains and the oceans and the sunrise. And oh my God, it's amazing.
I have found a much more spiritual impact on my life by designating a specific part of our day. We try every day to do some prayer and meditation, and we do it together. It's like it really helps out.
So important. It's so important to do it alone. But the fact that you're doing it together is just like amazing because you have each other. If you don't feel like doing it, she can say, "Oh, I feel like doing it," and it kind of motivates you. And it's like a prayer buddy. Oh, fantastic. Very lucky that you're both in the program, practicing the program, and doing the work at home together.
Very grateful. Yes.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's quite a gift. Thank you, guys.
So I wrote a few lines too with this homework. I truly believe in God, in a power much greater than myself. I did believe in God when I was a child because of my grandparents' beliefs. Then I questioned, and then I studied the steps. I came into program. Time after time, miracles have taken place in my life. I've gone through much hardships. I've worked the steps. I've waited. And every time God has shown me situations that have been beyond my imagination. God is a power that frees me if I could just let go 100% into each moment and let God, He will show me what true freedom is like. God has brought people in my life that also have strong beliefs in a higher power. And through these human connections, I see the light in them, which makes my life so much more meaningful. Yes, I do believe in God. I see God in nature, in kindness of people, in the eyes of my children and my grandchildren. God is everything for me.
That's excellent. Yeah. Especially the grandchildren part.
Yeah. They're so innocent. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the greatest creations is a newborn baby or, baby. It's just entering the world, blank slate, 100% perfect creation. It just, even the whole birth process to me is just a huge confirmation that there's something higher, larger than us. I mean, who could
Yes,
take?
and with my continuation in my recovery, you know, I want to be able to make my God even bigger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the wonderful part of this information is we can make our God even bigger, which is, it's almost mind blowing. There's no end to the possibilities. And there's so many people that keep it in such a small container, and it's contained, and it's this little God thing, and they wonder why their life isn't working or why God isn't working in their life. Well, there's no room. You
And
know,
like you
it's
said
too
earlier, you
small.
know, my fears, a lot of my fears have kind of dissipated,
Mhm.
just handed over to God.
Yeah, because you can't do both.
Yeah,
You can't have faith and be full of fear.
yeah.
It just doesn't work. Try being really fearful, finding your faith, and then try to, you know, put yourself back in there. You can't, it just doesn't work. It's an either or situation. You either go down the fearful path or you go down the faithful path. And you might switch off a little bit walking down that path, which is obviously normal. But whenever you get stuck in a fear or a fearful situation or a fear state of mind, which can last, God knows, hours, you literally have to switch it over to faith. And it's not, okay, I'm going to switch it over to faith and it's going to work out. It's, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to have the faith that whatever that is, I'll be able to handle. And,
God,
you know, sometimes we think, well, I don't want to be able to handle it because then it will happen. You know, it's one of those kind of mind things that we play on ourselves. Well, if I stay timid and, you know, a little bit off kilter, things won't happen. But it doesn't work that way. The faith that we put into the situations that come up that cause us fear is so important, because if we don't get that faith, that fear will overtake our lives. It's an addiction. We're addicted to fear because on
yes.
some level we think we can control whatever the fear of is. There's some level.
That's my addiction, that process of fear and worry.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I
And
love step two because
the backwards way of thinking we're in control. We think if we're in our fear, we're informed, we can control it. But that's not true. But that's what our mind, that craziness in our mind tells us. You know, if we just go there and we say, oh no, this is, you know, I can handle this. Doesn't change anything. Love hearing everybody's ideas. It's interesting that we're all kind of on the same wavelength, which I think comes with, you know, none of us are newcomers, so we've had the time and the experience in the program to do this work, to do the searching and find out what our God is all about. And that dang question about whether God is 100% everything or nothing, you know, that question really puts things in perspective. So when we're struggling, we have to stop and think about that question. Well, is God everything? And if we can answer it yes, then we have to get out of the way. And we don't want to do that. We want to stay right where we are so that we can run the show. We want to be the director, and we're not. So keep that, think about that, God is everything or God is nothing. You know, keep it in the back of your mind for a couple of days and see how you approach life or look at your life as you're reminding yourself that God is either everything or God is nothing. And if you decide, okay, well, it's somewhere in the middle, it's time to do an upgrade, because that's a pretty mediocre place to be. And, you know, if you believe that God created this universe, this vast universe, it's pretty simple to make the jump to, well, then God must be everything. Because what else is there? So think about that over the next few days or so. Think about that concept, everything or nothing. There was a short time in my life when I didn't think there was a God. I just couldn't reconcile it in my mind. And it was not a nice place to be. It was not comfortable. But I had to go through that to get to the other side. I had to look at that. I had to understand that. It was a comparison of what if God was nothing? How would I live my life thinking that God is nothing? And it was not nice. It was not a pretty place to be. So even if I'm wrong and there is no God, God actually is nothing, I'm going to stick with the God is everything because it makes my life that much better. Like exponentially better. So it's another great little exercise. Try walking around for a while thinking God doesn't exist. It can put you in a really bad place. It's not a friendly idea. But it gives you perspective because then you can say, okay, I know it's not nothing. Now I can make the leap to it's everything. I made the comparison. I lived it. It doesn't work. So I'm deciding there is a God. I'm deciding it's 100%. And that's what I'm going to manifest in my life because that's what I'm going to focus on. And I'm going to receive what I give out. So if you want to do a little test run, try the no God for a day. It's ugly. It's really ugly. All right. So we don't have any more questions or discussions. We can close up with the serenity prayer if you guys want to join me. God, please grant us the serenity
Please grant us the serenity
to accept the
Accept
things
the
we
things
cannot
we
change,
cannot change,
change.
the courage to
courage
change
to
the
change
things
the
we
things
can,
we can,
can.
and the wisdom to
wisdom to know
know
the
the
difference.
the
difference.
difference.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Later.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Keep up the good work,
Bye-bye.
everyone.